it's a pretty persuasive argument that Lucien puts forward, essentially that if you're going to have the Ten Commandments, why can't you have Baphomet? Why can't you have those two there?
Well, like I've said before, I think the Ten Commandments has historical significance for a building that passes law. The Ten Commandments are fundamental laws that have been adopted in the United States from the beginning, and this is just a way of focusing attention on the Ten Commandments. I think that the monument that they are trying to create is really in rebellion toward the statue of the Ten Commandments. And it won't be lawmakers that really make this decision. It'll be a panel of citizens that are probably appointed to judge and make that decision.
Representative Wesselhoft, is it in rebellion to the Ten Commandments themselves, or is it in rebellion to the separation between church and state not being granted?
It could be in rebellion of probably both, but you know, I just don't think that a panel of citizens in Oklahoma are going to greenlight a satanic statue or whatever it is that they're trying to communicate. I just think it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. But again, that decision won't be made by lawmakers.
Representative Wesselhoft, where do you stand on the Ten Commandments statue being there, whether there is the statue of Baphomet or not?
I don't have any problem at all with the Ten Commandments being posted there. I don't think it's a violation of church and state. Obviously, the ACLU does. They should also petition the Supreme Court and other places that bring a focus on Moses, the lawgiver, and the Ten Commandments. Those things are posted probably in a number of courts throughout the United States, and I guess they would like to have them all removed. But I really don't think that they have a very strong case in that regard.
Brady, I'll let you respond to that.
Well, one of the differences in what you see in many courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, is it's very typical to see some kind of artistic representation, maybe the act of Moses and the tablets, alongside many other parts of history that deal with law. Same way you might see a painting of people signing the Constitution in a public building. It's actually very common, just as Representative Wesselhoft has said. The difference in Oklahoma's monument and these things is that instead of being some kind of commemorative statue, something that harkens back to an act in history or a particular point, this is the actual text of the Ten Commandments, writ large, set in stone, and really confronting directly the person who is there to read, the person who is there using the Capitol and looking out the window. That's really what our concern is. It's not so much the idea of commemorating something historical here. It's that when you actually set in stone on government property the idea that you shall have no other gods but me, we feel like that's where it crosses the line, because it essentially tells somebody this is what you ought to believe. The other thing, though, that I think needs to be said is that, you know, both of the monuments or statues we're talking about here, you can argue have historical importance, and you can also argue that they make statements about what is right or wrong in terms of faith or the separation of church and state. And that's really one of the things behind our lawsuit, too, is we said, you know what, we think the state needs to get out of the religious monument business, because fundamentally, whether it's this appointed group of citizens that the representative was speaking of, or whether it's the legislature, we've got essentially people working for the government in some way that have to opine on what's right and wrong for people to believe. And that's really where it goes farther than we believe the government should go.
Mm-hmm. Pulling up a comment right now from our community. This is from Brian Penny, who says, once again, only two sides to the coin are being told. Where's the Jewish monument? Where's the atheist one, and the Buddhist one, and the Hindu one, and the Muslim one, etc., etc., etc.? Lucien, the monument, the Baphomet, and excuse me if I'm mispronouncing it, the Baphomet monument has historical significance. As you pointed out, it's clearly a very meticulously chosen representation and symbol for Satanism that is historical and has precedence to be put next to the Ten Commandments. But at the same time, you had to know that choosing to put this statue there, choosing a symbol of Satanism, was going to ruffle some feathers, right?
Well, absolutely. I thought it would, but I should also think that whoever decided to, Mike Rich should have thought that putting the Ten Commandments up would ruffle some feathers. But I need to respond to something Mr. Wesselhoft said, because he seems wildly misinformed. To be clear, the idea that the Ten Commandments are foundational in U.S. or Oklahoman law is absurd and obscene. Not only have the Ten Commandments never been codified into federal or state law, but they are, as a body, obviously counter-constitutional. As Mr. Henderson noted, there's statutes like thou shalt have no God before me, and thou shalt not worship graven idols, and those are necessarily the fiats of a theocracy. The United States was founded on pluralism, religious liberty. U.S. law has never been so backward as to put a failure to respect the Sabbath on equal terms with murder and theft. They're historical, but they're in no way American. And I feel like any one religious monument being on the Capitol grounds is intolerable. But having a plethora of them, a monument park, so to speak, as they originally said they wanted a monument park, that gives testament to the diversity and tolerance of our culture, that I think is more than tolerable. It's preferred.